It's cold. What should we do for dinner? You want some beef stew?
Yep.
Alright, let's go to the kitchen. Not that crap. Welcome back to my kitchen. It's cold outside. It's been getting colder and colder as the days go by. So I'm going to teach you how to make my version of beef stew, which will help warm your hearts and your souls, but also will fill the house with the lovely aroma of stew, and it will make everybody want to snuggle you because it's going to be so yummy. Alright, so this is going to be a simple beef stew. Beef obviously is the main ingredient, but here I have a little bit of everything that's going to be going in it, and I can take you from right to left. This is what I'm going to use to sear the meat with in the pot before we start throwing everything in. Here's a little bit of celery leaves, save those. I'm going to show you what we're going to use those for. We have potatoes, cut small for little people and whatnot. Everything's cut basically roughly the same size so that it all cooks at the same rate. We have our celery. We have a relatively ignored ingredient in the United States, leek, a little bit of onion, some carrot, and we have some green beans. I'm going to take you through how I prep everything to go into the stew. All right, so first off, green bean. You can substitute green beans with just about anything. You can use broccoli, Brussels sprouts, asparagus. I've used every single one of those in stew before, but today we have green beans, so that's what we're using. I like to line them all up, and I'll use my knife, the way I'm going to cut it, to kind of angle them a little bit. Come across once, come across again, little bite-sized pieces of green bean. All right, so next up is going to be the potato. We've got little baby Yukon Golds. I like gold potatoes more than just about any other potato. So I'm going to show you how I cut these up real quick. So I quarter it long ways. So now I have the two halves. And I do it this way because especially if there's little mouths. So I'll push one a little bit further. Give that one another chop. Okay. Same with this one. Push this one a little bit further because I always like to cut at an angle. It adds a little bit of a artisan touch to your meal. So then we there's your small pieces of potato for your stew. Next, we have our carrot. Okay. We got a peeler here. You don't need to go this far with it, but I'd like to use one tool while I'm preparing the carrot. So I will use the peeler to take off the end or any weird rough bits on the other end of the carrot. So we come through, cut that off with the peeler. I'll do the same thing over here, but I do it at an angle, and I'm going to show you why. Now, flip it back over, take off the fat end, and you don't have to peel your carrots. If you want more of an earthy flavor in your stew or a more rustic approach, you don't have to peel them. Now, this stuff can go over here, and I'll get back to that in a little bit. But what I'm going to do now is, like I was saying, I like to cut everything at an angle. I have a flat spot that I created when I peeled it. But now I have that angle here, and that's the angle I'm going to follow to cut my carrot up. So now it's all angled. Once I get to a part that's a bit big, a little wide, I will cut it in half. Flat side down on this one. You can cut it at an angle again. This one I flip over. It's got a flat part from the peeling. There's our carrot for our stew. All right, so next we have our onion. I'm just using regular yellow onion. So we have the head. We cut that off. That goes over into that pile. Lay it flat. Here's your root. Leave it on. Cut down on the root like that. Makes it easier to peel. Some you need to get more than just that initial skin of the onion off. If it's a little too green or there's a little bit of russet on it, peel that off. That little fleshy bit right there, peel that off. Put that in that pile. Come over to our other half, do the same thing. Okay, now what I like to do, this is a rough chop, it's not fine. I will cut once this way, okay, and 3 times for a rough chop this way. And then we just chop. And then we have this little bit left over. That's your onion waste right there. We'll do the same to the other one. Cut a horizontal. Okay. Move this over. 3 downward. And onions are round, so when I cut here, I cut at an angle. Okay, hold it all together. Okay, and then there's our onion waste, and that's the onion. All right, and an underused ingredient here in the United States, leek. Looks an awful lot like green onion, but it's not. It's its own thing. So the way I prepare a leek is I will peel that first one. Okay, that can go in that pile, and I will peel the second one, and I'm about to show you why. All that is dirt. Okay? There's dirt in the leeks, which is why you rinse with cold water down in there. But that's why I peel the first couple off, to get a little more access to the dirt. And then it's just a simple hold it at an angle and cut it in little cool little cute little hoops. And then you can break them apart once they're in your ingredient bowl. All right, this, what you are looking at right now, is not trash. The other video was the chicken wing video, and I saved a bunch of the wing tips for stock. This is for stock. Do not throw any of this away. If you need to, throw it in a bag and put it in the freezer. Onto the meat. So you can do this with a roast and cut it up how you want it, or you can get stew meat, which is like chuck or London broiler, or pieces of meat that were going to be a roast but are not due to the cutting process. It usually comes like this, okay? Not only do we want everything to be about the same size, but we want it to be small enough so they can fit a piece of stew and a bunch of the other ingredients on their spoon at the same time. So make it that small, okay? So here's our first bit of stew meat. We're going to cut that in half, and probably that in half, because it's going to shrink up as we sear it and as we throw it into the stew. So we have heated up our oil in our pot so we can start searing our meat, which we have seasoned with a little bit of salt and pepper. Okay? Meat goes into the pot. If you don't hear that sound, your pot is not hot enough, your oil is not hot enough, get it out. All we're looking for is to brown the meat. Stir it up a little bit. Let it sit for a second. This, if I can grab a hold of it. That's what we're looking for. We want a little color on our meat. We don't want it to look like boiled meat. That's kind of gross. Now you'll notice when I chopped this up a little more fine, I took a lot of the fat and the silver skin off. There's already intermuscular fat in the stew meat by its very nature. So what you're doing is you are allowing it to render when you sear it. And it's going to cook for a long time, so that's another way that it's going to render. So as we're moving through this, the salt in the meat that I put on it, it's been sitting there for a little bit, is starting to draw moisture out. So you can see how it's not just the oil under there, it's a little bit of the meat juice, which is fine. It's not going to really dry out because you're about to add a bunch of stuff to it. So we'll let it brown the meat and we'll be right back. Alright, so we've been searing our meat. You can come take a look. There's some very important things you need to see down in the pot. You can see how there's nice little brown bits down there. That's called fond. We want that. We need that. We love that. That's flavor. So, because it's beef, tomato paste. Several tablespoons of that. Make sure you get it all. Then you're going to start, it's called cooking it off. In other words, transforming its flavor from one thing to another. When you do that with tomato paste, it gets sweeter and it turns things richer. So now we have that. I want to throw in our garlic. Your garlic is going to get fragrant very quickly. Okay. You're going to let that sit for just a second. Let your garlic in there, and that's maybe 5-6 cloves of garlic. So now we want to start adding liquid after we add our smoked paprika and sumac. Not a lot. You don't need a lot. And then we want to add our aromatics. Use some kitchen twine so you don't have to pick stems out for your rosemary and thyme. That goes in. 1 glass of red wine. That goes in. Now, this is going to help us on our journey. This is going to pull all of those yummy bits off of the bottom of the pan, the fond. It's going to pull it all off, and you can start to feel it loosening up. Now, we don't want all of this red wine in there, so we're going to let this reduce. In other words, we're going to let it kind of boil, cook off a little bit, get rid of all the alcohol because we don't want to feed that to our kids because they're already crazy enough. So we're going to let it cook off the alcohol and reduce, meaning the wine is coming out in the steam and it's going to leave a thicker liquid behind. So we'll see you back here in just a little bit once it's done cooking off and reducing. Welcome back. We have reduced our red wine in there. It's starting to get very thick. You can see as I draw through, you can see the bottom of the pan sometimes. So that's getting around the thickness that we want because we're going to reduce this more later. So now we go to all of our ingredients. The first one I'm going to throw in, because they take the longest to cook, would be the potatoes. But they're all still pretty small cut, so it's not going to take that long. Okay, we have our potatoes in there. I'm going to go to the next step now. This is red wine vinegar, apple cider vinegar, Worcestershire sauce, and soy sauce. Soy sauce isn't going to make it Asian, it just adds depth of flavor. That is going to help loosen up some of the fibers of the meat, because when you're doing stew or roast, that meat tends to be on the tougher side. It's what they call a lesser quality cut of meat. It's not lesser quality, it just takes a little bit of time. Low and slow heating process. So we're going to mix this in there. Once we mix it well, we go to our next ingredient, which will be our carrots. Okay, throw our carrots in there. Mix this up. I know what you're thinking, Bud, are you going to add any more liquid in there? It's getting a bit dry. The answer is yes. And you can see, look at the meat, what the wine and reducing the wine did to the color of the meat. It's getting darker, it's getting richer. It's going to add a lot of depth of flavor to it. The sumac does that as well. Sumac is an underused spice here in the United States. It's gaining a little bit of traction, but sumac, it's hard to explain the flavor of sumac. If you can find some in a very good form, get a hold of it and try it with some of your beef recipes and things like that. It does add a lot of depth of flavor, and it does not take a whole lot. So now we move off to our onion. And then our celery. And then our leek. And last but not least, we have our green beans. Okay, so now we're going to run into some difficulty stirring this. So what we will do is we will start adding some liquid. Now I've got beef stock and I have beer. I have about 3 cups of beer, which is actually kind of cool how they did that. 3 cups of beer is about 2 beers. Well, it is 2 beers. I haven't taken a sip yet. Then we have 1 complete box of beef stock if you don't have your own readily made. Okay, we start to add our beef stock. Now it's important, add these things at room temperature so that it's not going to totally cool everything down, right? It'll heat up a lot faster and you can continue cooking everything a little bit long, in a shorter period of time, get back up to a simmer or a boil. So add them at room temperature. Okay, now beer. Typically, if you're going to put beer in a beef recipe, you can go with something a little bit on the darker side. Use your own preference. Don't use a cheap, crappy beer, because most of the time they don't have their own flavors. That's all syrup that they add to basically a carbonated beverage and add a little bit of alcohol. So find something that you really like, something you really enjoy, because it's going to add a unique flavor to everything, especially once it mixes in with the vinegar and the spices that we have in there. So add our beer, and I've added all of the vegetables and everything first so that I see how much farther I have to go to cover everything. This time, I don't get to have any beer. I'll have to open another one, which is fine because this is room temp. I don't want to drink that. So, everything is able to be covered. You can see we have that dark broth in there. The green beans are going to start cooking and everything like that. We're going to bring this back to a boil. We want to keep our aromatics buried in there because what that's going to do, it's going to flavor everything. It's going to make everything aromatic. And you can see as you stir, the leeks are starting to break up into their own little hoops. So if you didn't break them all up, not all is lost. So we're starting to make sure everything is covered. If we need to, we can add more stock, we can add more beer. It really depends on the size of your pot or your Dutch oven or whatever. I have a Dutch oven that I received as a gift, and I am ever so thankful for it. It's seen a lot of use, as you can tell by looking at the bottom of it. But once this comes to a boil, we're going to turn it down to a simmer, cover it, forget about it for a couple of hours. All right, so I'll see you in a couple of hours. All right, so it's been cooking for a couple of hours. It's time to see what everything looks like. The tenderness of the vegetables, the potatoes, how softened the meat has got, how tender the meat's gotten. So we're gonna check it out. Don't grab your lid, by the way. That's what mine looks like. I'm not gonna grab that. Alrighty. So this has been doing this for a little while now. I can feel how tender everything has gotten. I just have one thing I need to do. Alright. So that was our rosemary and our thyme. Okay. And we take that out because all the stems and everything are in there. But you'll notice a lot of the leaves have come off. So that's done its job. Now, how does it taste? Does it need any other seasoning? That's good. At this point, if you need to add any salt or pepper or anything like that, go ahead and do that. But you can taste the Worcestershire, you can taste a little bit of the soy, you got some salt and pepper and stuff like that. It's amazing. At this point, we are ready to serve to our family. All right, so here's the finished product. And remember when I told you about those celery leaves? We've already got celery in it, so it's not going to add any different flavor or anything like that, but we can garnish with a little bit of the celery leaves. That adds something that's a little fresh, gives it a little more vibrant color. Obviously, if you're feeding the family, that's not necessary or anything like that. It just adds a little something to it. And here we have our fresh baked bread, which will be coming to you in another video. Some key takeaways: cut all your vegetables and your potatoes first and then cut your meat. That way you're not washing things in between and things like that. It'll save you some time, it'll save you a headache, it'll save you doing dishes and stuff later. And I know I had all of my stuff laid out so you guys could see what I was putting in it, but put it in one big bowl so you can add it all at once, like the potatoes and everything like that. So you're not doing dishes for 3 weeks. Other than that, that's basically it. It's a little labor intensive in the beginning, but this is the end result, and you get to chill for a couple of hours. So could you put this in a crock pot? Absolutely, but I like to sear the beef prior to, so it doesn't just look like boiled meat. So yes, you can do it in a crock pot, but I think you're missing out on some of the flavor once you sear the meat that goes into the stew. And if you need to add something to it, go ahead. There's breadcrumbs. You can throw cheese on it. You can do whatever you want. Make it your own. Thanks for coming into my kitchen, and take care.